Hello everyone, welcome you all again to the lecture series on energy science and engineering. Today we will start the second lecture on module 2 and it is basically on the fossil fuels. In the previous lecture, I have discussed about the energy system and what are the resources we have available. These are basically your renewable energy resources and non-renewable energy resources. And I have also discussed about the energy storage systems, how we can store the excess energy and we can use in it in our crucial time. So today we will start the fossil fuel, which is basically belong to your non-renewable energy resources because these resources are called non-renewable because their formation takes geological time scale. That means it takes millions of years to form, and one depleted. That means one the resource is finished and it cannot be quickly replaced. To replace the oil in its natural form, we have to wait another million of years. So that's why these kind of resources are called as a finite resources or non-renewable resources. So fossil fuels are natural energy sources formed from the decomposed remains of ancient plants. It may be your plants or your marine animals. And these plants and marine animals are buried under layers of rock and sediment of million years. If you see this picture, suppose this is millions of first picture is millions of years ago, or then the plant or your marine life they have decayed and decomposed on the earth's surface, and after later the sediment had deposed in layer by layer and formed this kind of structure. And the ancient plants and marine animals they have buried for millions of years under this pressure and heat, and with time due to pressure and heat these marine plants and animals they have transformed to oil, or it may be your coal. So this is the process by which we get the fossil fuels. So an example of fossil fuels are basically your coal, oil, and natural gases. So let's begin with the coal. So coal is basically formed with the remains of plant material. If we consider your oil is formed basically from your marine uh, animals or organism, we can say. So coal is formed from plants and oil is formed from your marine organisms like your fish or any kind of marine organisms. So coal is formed from the remains of plant materials buried and subjected to the heat and pressure over millions of years, and it is primarily composed of carbon with varying amounts of hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. And based on the content of the carbon, we can classify coal in four categories. The first one is your peat, lignite, bituminous, and anthracite. And this classification has been made based on your uh, presence of the carbon in the coal or the raw material we obtain from by mining. The peat is the lowest category of coal and primarily found in swampy areas that's been near to wetland. And in case peat, the carbon content is basically around your 56%. And in case of lignite, the carbon content generally varies from 56% to your 60%. And if bituminous, generally bituminous coal can also be subclassified in another category that is known as your subbituminous. In this case, subbituminous coal, the carbon content is around 60 to 70%, and in case of bituminous, it is 70 to 85%. And anthracite is the highest grade of coal with the least amount of moisture used for heating and industrial purpose. And in anthracite, the carbon content is about more than 80%. It is greater than 80%. And usually, the coal is generally used from the ancient time for generation of the heat, electricity generation, and industrial processes like steel making and many purposes. Now come to the second widely used fossil fuel is your petroleum, and the use of petroleum has been increased in the 20th century due to the advancement in automobile and industrialization. Petroleum is formed from the remains of tiny marine organisms. These tiny marine organisms deposited on the seabed and with sediment. These tiny marine organisms, with millions of years, due to heat and pressure, it transformed into your oil. Now, extraction or oil is extracted through drilling either on land or offshore. By this category, we can classify the drilling or the extraction of oil as a onshore extraction or offshore extraction. If we extract the oil from sea, this is a sea in between a sea, and we are extracting the oil from sea. In that case, it is known as your onshore oil extraction. And if we extract oil from land, this is your land, then we call it a offshore oil extraction. And oil is refined into various products such as your gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, and petrochemicals. And there are many products are developed as a byproduct from your oil. The third, and again, we have another form of oil, which is not in a purified form, like as you get the crude oil, like previous one. So we can get also oil from oil bearing shale and sands. Oil shales are basically sedimentary rock that contains kerosene. This compound will be present in sedimentary rock, which can be converted into oil through heating. This is the oil shale, and it contains kerosene. And if we heat this sedimentary rock, we'll get crude oil like this one. And also oil sand, it is a impure form of your crude oil, and it is basically mix of your sand, clay, and bitumen. And bitumen is basically viscous form of crude oil, and when it's mixed with sand and clay, it forms this kind of material which is known as your oil sand. And we can also extract oil from this kind of oil sand. And extraction of both oil shale and oil sand requires significant energy for extraction and processing, which make this process are more expensive than your traditional crude oil extractions. And also these materials, oil shale and oil sands, are basically environmental harmful, because if it gets fire, then it can burn for 10 days or several weeks. So generally, we for as the present scenario, as we are approaching the sustainable world, we generally avoid oil shale and oil sand. We generally use the oil which is been extracted from as a crude oil from onshore or offshore side. Also, the another important non-renewable resource is your coal gasification, which is basically create a syngas. So coal gasification is the conversion of coal into synthetic natural gas, which is known as your syngas, which consists primarily of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. So how it's manufactured? Basically, coal crushed into fine powder. After that, it injection oil, oxygen, water. These are mixed with coal dust, and it buried underground at a very high depth. And from this, the syngas will generate by through chemical process, and we can collect this gas through a production well. So this is your injection oil, and this is your production oil. In injection oil, will provide oxygen plus water, and the where the fine powder of coal is present at the coal seam. Coal seam means the bed of coal, which is known as your coal seam. We have excavated the coal from where empty space is present there. We put this fine powder mixed with oxygen and water, and through chemical process, we will get the syngas. Syngas can be used to generate electricity, produce chemicals, or can be converted into synthetic fuels. But in that case, when you are doing the gasification of coal, in this process, there are also lots of emissions like carbon dioxide, which is harmful for the environment. But if we compare the efficiency and the emission rate compared to your natural fossil fuel like your crude oil or directly burning a coal, it is much more lesser. So in that case, we can consider that syngas is much more eco-friendly than your natural coal or your natural fossil fuel. That's mean when you are burning raw coal or burning raw crude oil or purified form as a petroleum. So these are the basic form of the fossil fuels I have discussed. Now, why we in this 21st century we are approaching for a sustainable world, and we are opting that we replacing the traditional energy sources. These are basically coal and oil by your clean energy. Now, why this is necessary? Because the burning of the fossil fuels like coal or your oil creates lots of emissions, harmful gases, which generally increase the temperature of the climate, basically by generating your greenhouse gases, which are basically your carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur dioxide, and some volatile compounds. Now, what are the let's discuss the environmental impact of fossil fuels. So it impact the air by burning of fossil fuels. It releases sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, volatile organic matter, and this can mix with the air, and it causes respiratory disease and contribute to acid rain. Acid rain will be harmful for structure which are basically made of your marble, and if we breathe the air mixed with this kind of compound like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, with time it will generate respiratory disease. Similarly, the fossil fuels also deteriorate or harm the water body, and it create water pollution by the means of your oil spills, coal mining runoff, and fracking operation can contaminate water supplies. Oil spills basically, you may have heard that the some oil tanker has been releases spills oil on the sea. Then what will happen? The all the sea surface will be covered by a thin layer of your oil, and what are the organisms or the living beings are present below this, they cannot get fresh oxygen, and ultimately they will die. And similarly, if this water is drinked by your some birds and other organisms or your habitat, then they will also die. So water pollution and also coal mining runoff means if we excavate coal from a place at greater depth of earth, we have heavy metals, and these heavy metals will mix with the water and it will degrade the surrounding water body. Also, depletion of resources is another concern for fossil fuels, because these are the finite and their extraction becomes more difficult and expensive as easily accessible reserves are exhausted. That means whatever is easily available, the resources or the places from where we can extract oil or coal. So we have already extracted the resources like raw material like coal or oil, and now we have to go for more deeper layer of the earth or some challenging situation from where we have to extract the oil, and it has become much more expensive, technologically challenging. So the cost of the extraction of oil or the fossil fuel is also decreasing as the resource is depleting. uh, these are the those were the basically the harmful activity or the harmful scenario of your of burning fossil fuels. Now discuss, should we use the fossil fuel at 21st century? What was the past of fossil fuel and present scenario and its future? So in past, basically fossil fuels were the driving force behind the industrial revolutions. What happened in Europe? In that case, powering system, power steam engines, factories, and whole industrialization has occurred due to the invention of the fossil fuels. But with increased drama, and it is has increased dramatically in the 20th century, particularly with the advent of automobile and growth of the petrochemical. But at present, till now, except the developed countries, the developing countries are mostly dependent on fossil fuels like coal and oil, because they don't have or the money or the economy or the technology to develop clean energy technologies. So they are dependent on your fossil fuels. But in future, the fossil fuel is uncertain. As concern about climate change and energy security we require for a particular nation, so the countries are prompt to invest in alternative energy sources, which are basically your clean energy technologies like your solar power or your wind turbines, and they are setting targets that after a certain time they will go for a non net zero emission. Generally, 2050 to 2070, this time frame has been selected. So that in this time frame, all the countries, developed and developing countries, should be net zero emission. That means they will not emit any greenhouse gases. Therefore, the future of fossil fuel is uncertain, and as the time will pass, we will shift our energy source or the energy requirement from the fossil fuels to your clean energy. So this is the end of the lecture. Thank you.